The phone slipped from my fingers, hitting the kitchen counter with a sharp crack. Those 3 little dots kept pulsing on Connor's screen, taunting me with their rhythmic dance. Someone was typing, deleting, typing again. I shouldn't have looked. Shouldn't have noticed the notification. Shouldn't have touched his phone at all. I'm Addison, and until 30 seconds ago, I thought I knew what trust meant. Mom? Everything okay? Chloe's voice drifted down from upstairs, probably hearing the clatter of the phone. Fine, honey. Just dropped something. My voice stayed steady, a teacher's practiced control. 16 years of marriage, and here I was, hands trembling over a text message that read, "Same time tonight? I'll wear that thing you like." The message disappeared before my eyes, deleted. Of course. Connor always was meticulous about covering his tracks. Even the way he arranged his shoes by the door, perfectly aligned, spoke of someone who liked things just so. Need help with dinner? Chloe appeared in the doorway, her dark hair pulled into a messy bun, Connor's eyes staring back at me from her face. The similarity made my stomach turn. Actually, yes. I needed a witness, someone to ground me in reality. Could you chop these onions? She moved beside me, our elbows touching as we worked. The kitchen filled with the sharp scent of onions, masking the acid taste of bile rising in my throat. Dad working late again? Her knife tapped steadily against the cutting board. Bars busy on Thursdays. The lie came easily, practiced over months of similar conversations. But now the words felt like glass in my mouth. My phone buzzed. Connor. Traffic's terrible. Don't wait up. Chloe peered over my shoulder. 3rd Thursday this month. I looked at her sharply. She'd been counting. Mason noticed too, she added, scraping onions into the pot. He pretends not to, but he does. The front door opened, and Mason's backpack hit the floor with its usual thud. His footsteps dragged toward the kitchen, heavy with teenage exhaustion. Dad working late? He asked, reaching for an apple. Chloe's knife paused mid-chop. The silence stretched until I forced words through numb lips. Yes, honey. The bar's busy. Mason bit into his apple, eyes fixed on something distant. Weird. I walked past there after practice. Place looked pretty dead. The wooden spoon in my hand snapped. Both kids stared at the broken pieces. Mom? Chloe's voice was careful, measured. It's nothing. I tossed the splintered wood into the trash. Just old. Everything gets old eventually, doesn't it? Mason disappeared upstairs, but Chloe lingered, her presence both comfort and witness to my unraveling. You know, she said, voice low, Aunt Rachel mentioned this guy, Peter something. He's good at finding things out. Things people want to keep hidden. My hands stilled over the stove. Your aunt talks too much. Maybe. Chloe shrugged. Or maybe she talks just enough. I turned to face my daughter, really looking at her. When had she grown so perceptive? So strong? Sometimes, she continued, the worst part isn't what you find out. It's pretending you don't already know. The timer buzzed, making us both jump. Dinner would be ready soon, a meal for 3 instead of 4. Again. I picked up Connor's phone, still lying where it fell. The screen had cracked, a spider web of lines distorting his lock screen, our family photo from last summer's vacation. All of us smiling, none of us seeing the fractures already forming. Mom? Chloe touched my arm. What are you going to do? I placed the broken phone exactly where Connor always left it, aligned perfectly with the counter's edge. I'm going to serve dinner. And then I'm going to make a phone call. To Peter. To Peter. The decision settled in my chest like a stone. Because you're right, honey. The pretending has to stop. Peter's office smelled like old coffee and secrets. The leather chair creaked under me as I pulled out Connor's credit card statements, copies I'd made while he slept. My hands didn't shake anymore. That was new. These are from the last 6 months, I said, spreading them across Peter's desk. Notice anything? He adjusted his reading glasses, weathered fingers tracing the lines of numbers. The Chandler Hotel. Every Thursday. He glanced up. Expensive taste. We've never stayed there. The words tasted bitter. Not once in 16 years. Peter nodded, his silence more telling than words. I'd known him since before Connor, back when he'd helped my sister through her divorce. Now here I was, following her footsteps. My phone buzzed. Connor. Running late tonight. Business meeting. Of course you are, I muttered, switching the phone off. Have you confronted him? Peter gathered the statements into a neat pile. Not yet. The door opened, cutting me off. Jenna stood in the doorway, her college backpack slung over one shoulder. Uncle Peter, I brought those files you, oh. Her eyes widened. Aunt Addison. The room suddenly felt too small. Jenna, my niece, Connor's part-time bartender, the girl who'd practically grown up in our house, shifted uncomfortably. Just dropping off some paperwork, I said, too quickly. For the school fundraiser. Right. Jenna's laugh was nervous, high-pitched. I should go. My shift at the bar starts soon. Thursday night. The words slipped out before I could stop them. Must be busy. Something flickered across her face, guilt? Fear? She practically fled the office. Peter watched her go, his expression unreadable. That's interesting. What is? The bar's closed on Thursdays. Has been for months. Renovation work. The room tilted sideways. I gripped the edge of his desk, knuckles white. Connor told me. He said. I know what he said. Peter's voice was gentle. Question is, what are you going to do about it? My phone lit up again, Chloe. Mom, Dad's home early. He's asking questions about where you are. I stood, gathering the statements. I need proof. Real proof. Addison. Peter's tone made me pause. Be careful. Sometimes the truth is worse than we imagine. At home, Connor was in the kitchen, cooking. He only cooked when he felt guilty. Where were you? His smile was perfect, practiced. I tried calling. Parent-teacher conferences. The lie came easily now. You know how it is. He nodded, stirring something that smelled like garlic and deception. Jenna's coming for dinner. Thought it would be nice, family time. My heart stopped. Jenna? Yeah, she seemed upset earlier. Said she could use some family support. Chloe appeared in the doorway, her eyes finding mine. I invited Mason's friend over too. For support. Connor's spatula paused mid-stir. What friend? Jake. His dad's a lawyer. Chloe's voice was innocent, but her message was clear. She was building witnesses. The more the merrier, I said, matching Connor's smile with one of my own. Two could play at this game of perfect families. Later, as everyone gathered around the dinner table, I watched. Watched how Jenna wouldn't meet my eyes. How Connor's hand shook slightly as he passed the bread. How Mason kept looking between them, picking up on the tension none of us would name. So, Jenna, I said, cutting into my chicken. How's work at the bar? Good. She stabbed a piece of broccoli. Quiet on Thursdays. Connor's fork clattered against his plate. Chloe kicked me under the table, a warning or encouragement, I couldn't tell. Funny, Mason said, since it's closed for renovations. The silence that followed was deafening. Connor recovered first. Different sections, different days. You know how construction goes. But the crack was there, visible now. In his voice, in Jenna's rigid posture, in the way everyone at the table suddenly found their plates fascinating. I stood, gathering empty glasses. Who wants dessert? I made Connor's favorite. Actually, Jenna pushed back her chair, I should go. But you've barely eaten, Connor protested. Our eyes met across the table, and for a moment, I saw fear in his. He knew. He knew that I knew. Stay, Jenna, I said softly. Family should stick together, don't you think? The timer in the kitchen went off, shrill and insistent. Someone had to break first. It was just a matter of time. The Chandler Hotel receipt burned in my pocket as I walked through its marble lobby. Everything gleamed, the floors, the fixtures, the fake smiles of the staff. The kind of place that charged extra for secrets. Can I help you? The receptionist's nameplate read, Sarah. I hope so. I slid my driver's license across the counter. My husband's been staying here. Connor Walsh? I need a copy of his latest bill for our tax records. Sarah's fingers hesitated over her keyboard. I'm sorry, but we can't. Please. I leaned closer, lowering my voice. I found charges on our credit card. If there's been fraud, I need to report it. Her expression shifted, sympathy, maybe recognition. She'd probably seen this scene before. One moment. She typed, then frowned. That's odd. The charges are under a different name, but the card matches your husband's. My throat tightened. What name? James Peterson. She turned the screen. Room 412, every Thursday for the past 3 months. James Peterson. Connor's grandfather's name. The man he'd always said he wanted to honor. There's a standing reservation for this Thursday, Sarah added. Shall I print the details? I nodded, numb. The printer hummed, spitting out paper that felt like sandpaper in my hands. My phone buzzed, Peter. Got something. Meet me at the bar. The bar was dark, closed for renovations that showed no sign of progress. Peter waited in his car across the street. Look at this. He handed me a manila envelope. Inside were photos, Connor entering the hotel, Jenna following 20 minutes later. Both carrying overnight bags. When? Last Thursday. Peter's voice was gentle. There's more. The next photo showed Connor at an ATM, withdrawing cash. Then at a jewelry store, emerging with a small bag. The bracelet, I whispered. The one Jenna had been wearing at dinner. Addison. Peter touched my arm. The hotel receipts, the jewelry, it's not the whole story. Look at the last photo. It was grainy, taken through a window. Connor and Jenna at a table, papers spread between them. One looked like a passport. He's planning something, Peter said. Something bigger than an affair. My phone lit up, Connor. Working late again. Don't wait up. I looked at the hotel reservation in my hand. 3 hours from now, room 412. I need to see that room. Peter's eyes widened. Addison, don't. Sarah will help me. My voice sounded strange, distant. She understands. The hotel key card felt heavy in my hand. Sarah had barely hesitated when I explained. Another woman who knew the taste of betrayal. Room 412 was pristine, waiting for its Thursday guests. I moved through it like a ghost, touching nothing, seeing everything. 2 water glasses by the bed. A forgotten hair tie on the bathroom counter. Jenna's brand. The closet door was ajar. Inside, a small safe stood open. Empty, except for a folded paper that had slipped behind it. My hands shook as I retrieved it. A bank statement from the Cayman Islands. Connor's grandfather's name again, but recent dates. Large deposits. My phone buzzed again. Chloe, Mom, where are you? Dad came home, but left again. He's acting weird. Then Mason, Mom, I heard Dad on the phone. Something about tickets. And finally Peter, get out of there. Now. Footsteps in the hallway. Keys jingling. I slipped into the bathroom, heart pounding. The door opened. You're early. Connor's voice. Had to make sure everything was ready. Jenna. Tickets are confirmed. Once the transfer clears next week, we're gone. What about Addison? The kids? A pause. They'll be fine. The divorce papers are ready. She'll get the house, enough money to keep quiet. She's not stupid, Connor. She knows something's wrong. By the time she figures it out, we'll be gone. 3 million buys a lot of distance. I pressed my hand against my mouth, stifling a laugh or a scream. 3 million. Our life reduced to a number. My phone buzzed silently. Peter again, police are on their way. Anonymous tip about fraud. Stay hidden. Through the bathroom door, I heard champagne being poured. Celebrations beginning. Endings too. I touched the bank statement in my pocket. Sometimes the worst betrayals aren't about the heart at all. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. In the other room, glasses clinked together in a toast to futures that would never come. The police station hummed with fluorescent lights and half-truths. I sat across from Detective Morris, the Cayman Islands bank statement between us, while Connor spent his first night in a holding cell. $3 million, Morris said, tapping the paper. That's a lot of renovation money. Funny how expensive lies can be. My voice didn't shake anymore. That should have scared me. Mrs. Walsh, we'll need you to sign these statements. He slid papers across his desk. But there's something else you should know. A knock interrupted us. Jenna stood in the doorway, wearing that damned bracelet. Her eyes were red, mascara smudged. I'm ready to talk, she said. Morris nodded. Have a seat. I stood to leave, but Jenna caught my arm. Stay. Please. You need to hear this. The bracelet glinted under the harsh lights. Connor's grandfather's name echoed in my head, James Peterson. A dead man's identity used to steal from the living. The money, Jenna started, then stopped. Swallowed. It wasn't just from the bar. Morris leaned forward. Go on. Connor. He's been running something bigger. The bar was just a front. She twisted the bracelet around her wrist. I thought I was helping with bookkeeping, but then I saw the real numbers. My phone buzzed. Chloe, Mom, there are people at the house. They're asking about Dad's business partners. Then Mason, Mom, they're taking Dad's computers. Mrs. Walsh. Morris was watching me. Your children are safe. We have officers there. Jenna's voice cracked. I'm so sorry, Aunt Addison. He said if I didn't help, he'd tell everyone about the accident. What accident? She pulled up her sleeve. Above the bracelet, a long scar traced her forearm. Last year, at the bar. A customer got rough. Connor. He handled it. Said he'd protect me, but then he started asking for favors. The room tilted sideways. Connor, my Connor, who color-coded his sock drawer and remembered every anniversary. Who apparently buried bodies and laundered money. The hotel meetings, I said, were for business. Jenna's laugh was hollow. The kind you can't do in broad daylight. Morris spread out more papers. We've traced connections to 3 other establishments. All using the same pattern. My phone lit up again. Peter, don't react. Connor made bail. His brother posted it. The brother we hadn't spoken to in 5 years. The one Connor said was trouble. Detective, my voice was steady, I need protection for my children. Already arranged. He gestured to an officer. We'll have someone escort you. No. Jenna stood abruptly. You can't go home. Connor has a backup plan. He always has a backup plan. The bracelet caught the light again, and suddenly I understood. It's not just jewelry, is it? She unclasped it, handed it to Morris. Look inside the links. The detective examined it under a magnifying glass. USB drives. Clever. Everything's there, Jenna whispered. Every transaction, every name. He gave it to me as insurance, but really it was a trap. If anything happened, I'd go down too. My phone buzzed one final time, an unknown number. You have no idea what you've started. Connor's voice, even in text, was perfectly controlled. Like his sock drawer. Like his lies. Detective, I stood, gathering my coat, I need to make a call. In the hallway, I dialed Chloe. Pack bags for you and Mason. Peter's coming to get you. Mom? Her voice was small. Are we ever coming back? I watched through the window as Morris bagged the bracelet, proof of both corruption and corruption's cure. Not until it's safe. I pressed my forehead against the cold glass. Not until I finish what your father started. Behind me, Jenna approached, her wrist bare where the bracelet had been. I want to help. For real this time. I turned to face her, seeing not my niece but a mirror, another woman trapped in Connor's web, looking for redemption. Then help me understand, I said. Everything. Because sometimes, the only way to end a story is to go back to its beginning. Even if that beginning was built on graves we never knew we were dancing on. Peter's safe house smelled like dust and old promises. I watched the surveillance feed on his laptop, my children asleep in the next room. On screen, Connor paced his office at the bar, phone pressed to his ear. The cameras were Jenna's idea, Peter said, adjusting the volume. She planted them yesterday. The audio crackled. Connor's voice filled the room. No, listen. The police don't have everything. The bracelet's just insurance. Yes, I know what happens if, don't threaten me. Jenna sat beside me, her bare wrist a reminder of what we'd given up. There's more coming. Watch. On screen, Connor's brother Marcus entered the frame. The prodigal son, returned at last. You promised this would be clean, Marcus said. Now the cops are crawling everywhere. Addison doesn't know the whole story. Connor's laugh was ugly. She thinks it's just about money and a cheap affair. Let her. My fingers curled into fists. Beside me, Jenna tensed. And the kids? Marcus asked. Leverage, if I need it. Connor straightened his perfectly pressed shirt. Addison won't risk them. The laptop screen cracked under my grip. Peter gently pried my hands away. Mom? Chloe stood in the doorway, Mason behind her. They'd heard everything. Go pack, I said. We're leaving. No. Chloe moved closer, eyes fixed on the screen. We're done running. On the feed, Connor pulled out a familiar leather notebook, my grandmother's diary, the one thing I'd saved from my childhood home. See this? Connor waved it at Marcus. Everything we need is in here. The old property deeds, the original contracts. Once we have those. The development deal goes through, Marcus finished. And the money gets cleaned through the construction. Perfect crime. My grandmother's land. The acres of forest she'd protected, that I'd inherited. That Connor had been trying to get me to sign over for months. He can't access it without your signature, Peter said quietly. No. I watched Connor slide the diary into his safe. But he can make me sign. Jenna stood abruptly. I need to go back. What? No. The word came out sharp. He trusts me now. Thinks I'm terrified of the police finding out about everything. She touched her scarred arm. I can get into that safe. It's too dangerous. But even as I said it, I knew she was right. Mason stepped forward, his quiet voice steady. Dad always said I was just like him. Maybe it's time to use that. What do you mean? He'll expect me to come home. The dutiful son, worried about his father. His smile was pure Connor. I can distract him while Jenna gets the diary. Absolutely not. But Chloe was already nodding. I'll create a scene at school, she said. He'll have to come deal with it. Administrative emergency, parent conference. You've all lost your minds. I looked at Peter for support, but he was studying the surveillance feed thoughtfully. It could work, he said. With the right timing. On screen, Connor opened another bottle of whiskey, his movements precise even in destruction. Just like everything else he'd torn apart. My phone buzzed. Detective Morris, Connor's brother, made some interesting calls. You need to move. Now. Another message followed, and Mrs. Walsh. Whatever you're planning. Make it count. I looked at my children, seeing not victims but warriors. At Jenna, no longer the manipulated niece but a survivor seeking redemption. At Peter, who'd watched my sister's destruction and wouldn't let history repeat. Tomorrow, I said finally. We do it tomorrow. And then? Chloe asked. I watched Connor on screen, drinking to victories he hadn't won yet. Then we take everything. Not just the diary or the evidence. Everything. Because sometimes revenge isn't about destruction. Sometimes it's about reconstruction, building something stronger from the ashes of what was burned. Mom? Mason's voice was soft. Are we bad people for doing this? No, honey. I pulled him close, feeling Chloe and Jenna join the embrace. We're just finally playing by his rules. On the laptop, Connor raised his glass in a silent toast, unaware that his perfect plan was about to meet its perfect destruction. The plan fell apart like everything else in my life, quickly and without mercy. I stood in Connor's office, my grandmother's diary clutched to my chest, while Mason lay unconscious on the floor. The cut above his eye still bled. Sit down, Addison. Connor's voice was silk over steel. The gun in his hand didn't waver. He's 14, I whispered. He's your son. He's a liability. Like mother, like son. He gestured to the chair. Now sit. Through the office window, I could see Jenna being led away by Marcus, her attempt to crack the safe having failed spectacularly. Chloe's diversionary tactic at school had only bought us minutes, not the hours we'd needed. The diary. Connor held out his free hand. Unless you want Mason to wake up with more than just a headache. My fingers traced the worn leather cover. Inside were the property deeds, the contracts, my grandmother's legacy. And now, Connor's ticket to millions. You never loved me, did you? The question surprised us both. His laugh was familiar, yet strange. I loved what you represented. The perfect wife, the perfect cover. He stepped closer. Sign the papers, and this ends quietly. Like that customer at the bar. The one Jenna told me about. Something flickered in his eyes. She should have kept her mouth shut. Like you kept quiet about the money laundering. The development deals. Careful, darling. The gun shifted toward Mason. You're not the only one with evidence. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Peter's signal, the police were in position. I just needed to keep Connor talking. Why Jenna? The question had haunted me for weeks. Because she was easy. Vulnerable. Just like you were, 16 years ago. His smile turned cruel. Remember? The grieving teacher, so lost after her grandmother's death. So eager for someone to take control. Mason stirred, groaning. Connor's finger tightened on the trigger. The papers, Addison. Now. I placed the diary on his desk, opened it to the marked page. My hands didn't shake as I picked up the pen. That's my girl. Connor's voice dripped satisfaction. Always so. The window exploded inward. Connor fired, once, twice. I threw myself over Mason as glass rained down. Police. Drop the weapon. But Connor was already moving, grabbing the diary with one hand, shooting with the other. I heard Peter shout, heard returning fire. Then silence. I lifted my head. Connor was gone, taking the diary with him. Blood stained the carpet where I knelt, Mason's, mine, maybe both. Mom? Mason's eyes fluttered open. Did we get it? I helped him sit up, checking his wound. No, baby. We didn't. But I saw Jenna. He winced. Before Dad hit me. She had something in her hand. Peter burst through the door, gun drawn. Addison. Are you? He's gone. I pressed my sleeve against Mason's cut. He has the diary. Peter holstered his weapon, a strange smile playing at his lips. Does he? From his jacket, he pulled out familiar worn leather. My grandmother's diary. How? The one Connor took was a copy. Jenna appeared in the doorway, Marcus notably absent. We switched them last week. The real documents are safe. But the safe. My head spun. The plan was exactly what Connor expected. Peter helped Mason to his feet. So we gave him what he wanted to see. Through the broken window, sirens wailed. Connor would be running, thinking he had won. Thinking he had destroyed me one final time. Mom? Mason leaned against me. What happens now? I opened the diary, passed the property deeds to the last page. There, in my grandmother's handwriting, was a name I hadn't seen in years. A name Connor didn't know about. Now, I said, we finish this. For real. Because sometimes rock bottom isn't where you end. Sometimes it's where you finally see the truth, not just about others, but about yourself. And what I saw was crystal clear. Connor hadn't married a victim 16 years ago. He'd married a survivor. He just didn't know it yet. The Chandler Hotel's penthouse suite looked different in daylight. Colder. Like Connor's smile as he watched me enter, his fake diary still clutched in his hand. I wondered how long it would take you to find me. He poured 2 glasses of whiskey. Always the perfect host. Where's Marcus? Gone. With the money. Connor's laugh held no humor. Turns out betrayal runs in the family. I moved closer, noting the packed bags by the door. Like father, like son. Speaking of sons. He slid one glass toward me. How's Mason's head? My fingers itched to grab the crystal tumbler and smash it into his perfect teeth. Instead, I pulled out my phone, playing the video Jenna had recorded last year, the accident at the bar. Connor's expression didn't change as he watched himself push the drunk customer down the stairs. Watched Jenna scream. Watched himself stage the scene. Insurance, he said simply. Like everything else. Including me. Especially you. He closed the diary. Though I have to admit, you surprised me. All these years, I thought you were just convenient. Movement in the hallway caught my eye, Peter's signal. Everything was in place. The property deeds, I said. They're worthless without my signature. About that. Connor's smile widened. Remember our anniversary trip to Vegas? That contract you signed while slightly intoxicated? My blood ran cold. You didn't. Power of attorney. Limited, but enough. He pulled out another document. Everything transfers tomorrow. The land, the development rights, all of it. There's just one problem. I finally picked up the whiskey glass. You're reading the wrong diary. The door burst open. Detective Morris entered, followed by Peter and, most surprisingly, Marcus. "Hello, brother," Marcus said. "Sorry about the money. Had to make it look good." Connor's composure cracked. "What?" I opened my grandmother's real diary to the last page. "Remember when you asked about my grandfather? The one who disappeared before I was born." Understanding dawned in his eyes as he read the name, James Peterson. "Your grandfather's identity," he whispered. "The one I used for money laundering, tax evasion, murder." Morris stepped forward. "We have it all, Mr. Walsh. Including your Vegas paperwork. Forgery's a serious charge." Connor lunged for the balcony. I moved without thinking, years of suppressed rage finding their target. The whiskey glass shattered against his temple. He stumbled, fell. "That's for Mason," I said. Peter and Morris moved to restrain him, but Connor was laughing through the blood. "You think this changes anything?" He spat. "You're still the grieving teacher. The convenient wife. The perfect victim." "No." Jenna appeared in the doorway, holding a familiar bracelet. "She's the woman who taught me to stop being afraid." The USB drives hidden in the bracelet's links contained everything, every transaction, every threat, every carefully orchestrated manipulation. Including his confession from moments ago. "You recorded." Connor's mask finally shattered completely. "Like you taught me," Jenna said. "Insurance." Morris read him his rights while Peter checked his restraints. Through it all, Connor kept his eyes on me. "I did love you," he said quietly. "In my way." "I know." I gathered the real diary, the evidence of his crimes. "That's what makes this perfect." "What does?" "Knowing that for 16 years, you thought you were destroying me." I moved to the door. "When really, I was learning how to destroy you." "Mom?" Chloe waited in the hallway, Mason beside her. Both stronger than I'd ever been at their age. "It's done," I said. Behind us, Connor called my name one last time. I didn't turn around. Some endings don't need an audience. In the elevator, Mason touched the fading cut above his eye. Was it worth it? I looked at my children, at Jenna, at the family we'd pieced together from broken trust and shared survival. "Ask me tomorrow," I said. Because some victories take time to feel real. And some scars need to fade before you can see them as battle wounds rather than weaknesses. But tomorrow was finally ours to decide. The courthouse steps felt colder than they should in spring. I watched Connor being led away in handcuffs, his perfect posture finally broken. He didn't look back. Neither did I. "Ready?" Peter held out my grandmother's diary. Inside the courtroom, the evidence had spoken for itself. The USB drives, the financial records, the video confession. But it was the diary that had sealed everything, my grandfather's identity, the original property deeds, the truth Connor had tried to steal. Almost. I turned to face the gathered press. They wanted their story, the betrayed wife, the corrupt businessman, the perfect family shattered. But that wasn't my story to tell anymore. Jenna stepped forward, her scarred arm now worn like a badge. "I'll handle the statements." "You don't have to," I said. "I do." She squared her shoulders. "For both of us." Mason touched the fading cut above his eye. "Can we go home now?" Home. Not the house Connor had chosen, with its perfect lawn and carefully arranged furniture. Something new. Something ours. Actually, Chloe pulled out a set of keys, my grandmother's old house keys. "I have an idea about that." The property stretched before us, acres of forest Connor had tried to steal. The old house stood exactly as I remembered, waiting. "It needs work," Peter observed. Good. I watched Mason wander toward the creek where I'd played as a child. We need something to build. Mom? Chloe's voice was hesitant. There's something else you should know. She handed me her phone. On screen was a message from Connor's brother Marcus. The money he stole from you, I found it. All of it. What do you want to do? Peter asked. I looked at my children, at Jenna, at the home that had sheltered 3 generations of survivors. I want to build something he can't break. The contractor arrived that afternoon. As she surveyed the property, I opened the diary one last time. Past the deeds and documents, past the evidence that had destroyed Connor's empire, to a letter I'd never shown anyone. Not even in court. My dearest Addison, my grandmother's handwriting flowed across the page. By the time you read this, you'll understand why your grandfather disappeared. Why I had to protect what was ours. Sometimes the greatest act of love is knowing when to fight back. Mom? Mason called from the creek. Look what I found. He held up a piece of sea glass, smoothed by water and time. Green, like his eyes. Like Connor's eyes. Keep it, I said. Some things are worth remembering. Even the bad stuff. Especially the bad stuff. I touched his healed cut. It shows us who we really are. Jenna joined us, her phone buzzing with interview requests. They want to know what happens next. Tell them the truth, Chloe said. Tell them we're building something. The contractor's estimate arrived, repairs, renovations, new beginnings. All funded by Connor's hidden accounts, now frozen and seized. Justice had a price tag, after all. There's one more thing, Peter said quietly. He handed me an envelope, divorce papers, already signed. Connor's final surrender. I didn't open them. Some endings don't need witnesses. Instead, I watched my family explore their new home. Mason by the creek, finding pieces of the past. Chloe on the porch, planning the future. Jenna with her camera, documenting everything Connor had failed to destroy. You know, Peter said, revenge usually leaves people empty. This isn't revenge. I picked up a piece of sea glass Mason had missed. This is reconstruction. The sun set behind the trees Connor had tried to sell, casting shadows that looked like possibilities. Tomorrow would bring contractors and questions, reporters and responsibilities. But tonight, in this moment, I held my grandmother's diary and my children's future in the same hands. And neither felt heavy anymore. Because sometimes the greatest victory isn't in destroying what hurt you. It's in building something so strong, so beautiful, that the hurt becomes just another layer in its foundation. And we were already building.
My name is Karen, and I am a 38-year-old office worker. I have been married to Paul for 3 years, who I met through a family friend. My family is somewhat wealthy, and since my sister Janet and I are the only children, our relatives were concerned about who would inherit our family's assets. This is why they introduced me to Paul. Paul moved in with us at my family home shortly after we met. My mom had passed away a few years before, so it was just my dad, my husband, and me living together. Paul was very nice and took good care of my father. However, the family friend who introduced us warned me just before our wedding that Paul was very interested in money. This worried me, but Paul didn't show any signs of greed, so we got married. Even so, I kept an eye on him because of what the family friend said. Paul didn't seem greedy, but he was curious about my father's wealth. He often asked about it casually when he and my father were drinking together. But since my father spoke openly about it, I wasn't too concerned. Paul also took an interest in my sister Janet, who is 6 years younger than me and very lively and outgoing. Unlike my calm major, Janet has flashy relationships with men and looks quite different from me, which surprised Paul when he first saw her. Watching Paul be fascinated by Janet, who is so different from me, made me feel uneasy. One day, when Paul found out I couldn't inherit my father's estate, he yelled at me, "You can't inherit the property. I have no use for you anymore. We're getting divorced right now." Later, after he remarried, I got my revenge on him and my sister. At first, I believed that having a beautiful sister meant there was nothing to worry about. But I eventually realized the reasons behind our relatives' concerns. My father doted on my sister, providing her with every opportunity, including the chance to attend both college and community college. After graduating, however, my sister lacked a clear purpose for her education. She seemed mainly interested in avoiding work. Our mother tried to encourage her to get a job immediately after her first college graduation, but my father supported her decision to continue her education at community college. After completing her studies there, she secured a position at a company owned by one of my father's acquaintances. This job, however, lasted only 6 months. She resigned with the unexpected excuse that she couldn't showcase her talents at that workplace. Both my mother and I were taken aback. My sister spoke as if she fully understood the job despite her minimal experience. My father, her supporter, quickly found her another job. It wasn't long after she started this new role that my mother fell ill and was hospitalized. During this time, my sister visited her daily, frequently taking time off from her new job. She eventually resigned from this position too, claiming she needed to care for her mother. But her idea of care involved mostly chatting with our mother or being engrossed in her mobile phone in the waiting room. I found myself handling practical tasks such as changing my mother's hospital laundry while my sister offered little real assistance. It may have been comforting for my mother to have company, but her condition deteriorated. About a month after she was hospitalized, she soon reached a point where she could no longer speak. Within 3 weeks of her condition worsening, my mother passed away. The suddenness of her passing left both my father and sister too shaken to even prepare for the funeral. This left a significant burden on me during an already difficult time. After my mother passed away, I found myself handling all the arrangements. Fortunately, our relatives helped, and we were able to bid farewell to her peacefully. In the wake of this, my sister took on a part-time job and moved into her own place. However, her earnings from the job weren't sufficient to cover her rent and other living expenses. Consequently, our father stepped in, covering her rent and utility bills, while the money she made was mostly spent on her leisure activities. Whenever her part-time income proved inadequate, she would turn to our father for additional financial support. Under our mother's watch, such requests were kept in check, as she was strict about financial discipline with my sister. However, after her death, my father began to indulge these requests, providing whatever money my sister asked for without hesitation. Initially, I saw no issue with this setup, assuming both my father and sister were content. Even after marrying and living with my husband in my parents' home, this financial arrangement continued unknown to me. At the time, my sister also began asking my husband for money, and he complied, often asking her to keep it a secret to avoid causing me any jealousy. He found it difficult to say no to my attractive sister and willingly contributed to her expenses. My sister essentially lived off the money she received from both my father and my husband, engaging with her part-time job only sporadically and according to her whims. This unsustainable lifestyle came to an abrupt end when our father became ill and required hospitalization. I stepped in to care for him, balancing hospital visits with my work responsibilities. Despite the severity of our father's condition, my sister never appeared at the hospital. Instead, she began calling me aggressively, demanding money. She argued that since she had been receiving a regular allowance from our father, I should continue providing for her as before, stating that her rent and utilities were still being deducted from our father's account, Her tone was confrontational, and I was stunned by these revelations. I became infuriated by her selfish attitude, someone maintaining her own lifestyle while completely disregarding our father's well-being in the hospital. The situation exposed a painful truth about my sister's priorities and strained our relationship even further. I was tempted to hang up on her, but she sounded like she was in trouble. So I asked her how much money Dad has been giving her every month and suggested she get a full-time job and support herself with what you earn. My sister responded irritably, "Stop nagging. I was getting $1,000 a month, and remember, rent is separate." I was shocked by her response. She seemed proud of the amount, and it made me think that if I continued to give her this much money each month, she would never be motivated to work seriously. At first, I didn't see a problem with giving her money, thinking my father would soon recover from his hospitalization. But then his condition took a turn for the worse, and I quickly reached out to our relatives. The doctor confirmed it was serious, which shocked me. During this stressful time, I needed my husband's support, but he rarely visited the hospital, claiming he was busy with work. When he did visit, he asked inappropriate questions like, "Frank's estate must be huge, right, since you and your sister are the only heirs. Are you going to split it in half?" I was speechless. My husband seemed only interested in the inheritance, and I felt a mix of realization and disgust, understanding what the relatives meant when they said he was obsessed with money. When I called my sister to inform her of our father's critical condition, her only concern was about her finances. "Make sure you pay me every month. I can't live without that money," she demanded. The call ended suddenly, leaving me furious at her words, but I was also worried because I thought I heard a faint male voice in the background. About a month later, my father passed away. Sadly, neither my sister nor my husband was with him in his last moments. From my experience with my mother's funeral, I knew how tough it was to organize one. Neither my husband nor my sister offered any help, and my sister didn't even come to the funeral. My husband did show up, but left quickly, claiming he had work. A relative who had introduced us asked me, "Where's Paul?" It's odd for the husband not to be here, isn't it? I just gave a forced smile and said he was busy with work and had gone home. The relative seemed disappointed, and I felt like sighing too. After my father's funeral, when I finally had a moment to myself, my husband asked me with a sly smile, "So how much did you inherit?" Even if you split it, you must have gotten a lot, right? Just like the relatives had warned before our marriage, he was only interested in my father's inheritance. I told him, looking straight at him, my sister got $100 million, and I got nothing. I hadn't even spoken to the lawyer yet and was still dealing with the funeral. Seeing my husband so excited about the inheritance almost made me laugh rather than angry. Believing what I said, he immediately shouted, "What? You can't inherit any property. I don't need you anymore. Let's get divorced now." I felt the same way, so I snapped back, "Let's do it. You married me for my father's inheritance anyway." I handed him the divorce papers I had prepared. He seemed surprised, as if he hadn't expected this, but he signed them anyway. As he left the house after signing the divorce papers, he said bitterly, "I'll divorce you, who gets 0, and remarry your sister Janet, who gets the $100 million. And then he left. I didn't care what he said and went ahead with the divorce, happy to be rid of my awful husband. It seemed like he started trying to marry my sister the very next day. A few days later, he called me demandingly. "Do you still believe that story? When will you sort out the inheritance? Hurry up and give Janet the $100 million. He shouted this over the phone. I had been waiting for him to contact me because I didn't want to reach out first after he left. I answered him calmly, "Let's discuss this at my place next Sunday." I'm preparing for the procedure and will be waiting, thinking he was about to receive the inheritance. My ex-husband happily ended the call. However, I was actually looking forward to seeing his reaction when he discovered the truth. On the weekend, my ex-husband and my sister came to my family home and were surprised to see a lawyer there. My ex tried to act normal, thinking, of course you need a lawyer when inheriting a lot of money. Then the lawyer looked puzzled at my ex-husband and began, compensation claim before we talk about any inheritance. The lawyer then showed my ex-husband several photos of him leaving my sister's house, clearly dated before our divorce was finalized. These are evidence of infidelity, the lawyer told him. So you owe compensation. I had overheard him discussing the inheritance with my sister and had asked the lawyer to look into his infidelity. They might have thought I was too distracted by my father's funeral, but my ex-husband and sister were meeting at her place almost daily, giving me plenty of evidence. The topic quickly shifted from inheritance to compensation, leaving my ex-husband and sister shocked. However, my ex-husband recovered quickly and scoffed. Compensation is nothing compared to the $100 million from the inheritance. I'll pay for it right away. He then signed the compensation documents provided by the lawyer, trying to appear unconcerned and confident. I confirmed everything and told him, enjoy your life with my sister who inherited nothing since you signed. I'll make sure you pay the compensation. When they heard there was no inheritance, my sister screamed in shock and her husband turned bright red, angrily saying, there's no way the inheritance is zero. I won't let you take it all for yourself. The lawyer then calmly began to explain to the furious couple, Janet is technically the stepdaughter of your late mother and was not legally adopted by your late father. Therefore, there is no legal parent-child relationship, and Janet cannot inherit anything from your father's estate. I'd also explained to my confused sister about our family history. When our parents were married, Janet, you were about a year old, so you probably don't remember. But I do. I was 8 years old when our parents were married, and I was happy to suddenly have a sister. I never imagined that my sister would end up taking my husband. Our parents had children from previous relationships, and someone thought it best for them to remarry. My mother treated me as if I were her own daughter, and my father was very fond of my sister. Maybe because she wasn't his biological daughter, he spoiled her a bit extra, wanting to make sure she felt loved. Although both our parents had children from previous marriages, my mother, who was suspected by some relatives of targeting our wealthy family's assets, refused to legally adopt my sister. The relatives only suggested marriage proposals for me because they knew I was the only one who could legally inherit my father's property. If our parents had had a child together, it might have made things even more complicated. But fortunately or unfortunately, they never did. Now I understand why my father continued to support my sister financially even after she grew up. He couldn't leave her any inheritance. I never legally adopted my mother, so legally we weren't parent and child. But that never mattered in how we lived every day. It turns out that my parents had never explained to my sister that they were both previously married before they got together. She only learned this truth today when my ex-husband realized the situation. His face quickly changed from bright red to pale blue. He had not only failed to secure any inheritance from my sister, but had also signed a document obligating him to pay compensation. Looking visibly shocked, my ex-husband asked me, was what you said about my sister getting $100 million and me getting nothing a lie? I struggled to hold back my laughter and replied, of course it was a lie. I said it to get back at you for cheating on me. Plus, there's no such thing as a bankrupt estate worth $100 million. Even my wealthy father didn't have that kind of money. Suddenly, my sister, who had been quiet until then, screamed out, "I've been relying on Dad's inheritance and have been spending a lot. What about the money Dad used to give me? Will Karen cover it now?" I responded to my sister, who seemed panicked. "You have a dependable husband now, so you shouldn't need that money anymore, should you? Let Paul take care of you." She turned to look at her pale-faced husband, who shook his head and said, "I've also done a lot of shopping expecting to receive the inheritance, so I can't afford it. Plus, I have the compensation to pay. So I'm financially stretched." At that point, my ex-husband began to apologize profusely to me. "Karen, I'm really sorry. It was all my fault. Will you forgive me and consider starting over?" Watching this scene, the lawyer had to stifle his laughter as he prepared to leave. The confidence and arrogance my ex-husband had shown upon arriving had completely evaporated, and his deep apologies now seemed utterly absurd. After we finished our discussion, my ex-husband and my sister left the house looking defeated. Not long after, they divorced. My ex-husband, who had remarried with the intention of gaining an inheritance, suddenly found himself without interest in my sister once the prospect of money was gone. He even muttered to himself that with the compensation payments he owed me, he couldn't possibly support my sister with no assets to his name. It was decided that he would pay the compensation in installments from his monthly paycheck. The lawyer recommended this method as the most practical solution under the circumstances. After my father's passing, the consequences of his indulgent support became painfully apparent. My sister, who had grown accustomed to financial support from our father, found herself in an unenviable position. She was compelled to work part-time jobs which barely paid enough to cover her daily expenses, let alone the mounting debts that loomed over her. Despite her efforts, the financial burden proved too heavy. Eventually overwhelmed by the accumulating debt, she had no choice but to file for personal bankruptcy. In a desperate move to escape her financial woes, she gave up her condominium, disappearing without leaving a trace. As of now, her whereabouts remain unknown, leaving a void in the family that once depended on each other so deeply. The situation underscored a harsh reality. Our father's well-intentioned but ultimately misguided financial support had shielded my sister from the necessity of developing a work ethic and financial independence. This protection, while provided out of love, had left her ill-prepared for the harsh realities of adult life. As for myself, the aftermath of these family troubles and the dissolution of my marriage left me residing alone in the family home. A house that now felt too large and empty, echoing with memories of a happier, more intact family. The solitude, however, provided me with ample time for reflection. It became a period of self-discovery and reassessment of what I truly wanted out of life. During this introspective period, some well-meaning relatives suggested that perhaps the time had come for me to consider entering into a new relationship. They talked about introducing me to potential suitors, hoping that a new partnership might bring me happiness and stability. However, the bitter experience with my ex-husband, who had shown his true colors as someone more interested in financial gain than in genuine companionship, made me wary of repeating past mistakes. His betrayal had been a painful lesson in discernment, teaching me the importance of knowing someone's character and intentions thoroughly before making such a profound commitment. Determined to take control of my own destiny, I decided to decline the offers for my relatives to arrange introductions. The thought of being matched with another partner who might view me as merely a means to an end was intolerable. Instead, I resolved to find a partner on my own terms. Guided by the lessons learned from my past experiences, this decision was empowering, marking a new chapter in my life where I could prioritize my own values and desires in a relationship. In embracing this newfound independence, I began to explore various avenues for meeting potential partners, whether through social events, community activities, or even online dating platforms. I was committed to finding someone who shared my values, someone who sought a partner for the right reasons, valuing respect, honesty, and genuine affection above financial considerations. This journey was not just about finding a new partner. It was about reclaiming my autonomy and learning to trust again after betrayal. Each step forward was a reaffirmation of my ability to shape my future, a future where my choices would lead to genuine connection and real love, rather than transactional relationships defined by financial dependency. Thus, as I move forward, the lessons of the past remain with me, a guide to avoiding the pitfalls that had once ensnared my family and me, and a beacon towards a more hopeful and self-determined future.
You know how they say life can flip on a dime? That's exactly what happened to me. At this party, my friend Jess had been nagging me for weeks to come out and meet her bunch of incredible friends. Honestly, I was more into a quiet night with my reports and market analysis, but Jess wouldn't have any of it. "Sarah, you need to get out more. Come on, it'll be fun," she insisted. So there I was in my least uncomfortable party dress, nursing a glass of wine and sticking out like a sore thumb among strangers. The place was buzzing, people laughing and chatting away. I stuck close to Jess, who seemed to know everyone. She was in the middle of introducing me to a couple of her friends when he walked in. "Tom." Jess's face lit up. "Oh, you've got to meet Tom," she said, dragging me through the crowd. Tom was this average-looking guy, nothing like the flashy type she'd expect at these gatherings. He had a sad smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Jess introduced us, and for some reason, we clicked. Maybe it was the way he talked about his daughter Lily with such warmth and pride, or maybe it was his candidness about being a widower and raising her alone. Whatever it was, it got me. We found ourselves away from the crowd, sitting on some ridiculously oversized chairs. "So, Sarah," Tom started, his voice rough but friendly. "Jess tells me you're into stocks, and all that Wall Street stuff." "Yeah, something like that. I analyze investment opportunities, help people grow their money." "Sounds boring." "I know," I replied, trying to make my job sound less nerdy than it was. "Nah, that sounds pretty damn impressive. Wish I knew a thing or two about handling money like that," he chuckled, taking a sip of his beer. We talked about everything and nothing, movies, the nightmare of dating. I found myself laughing more than I had in months. Tom had this easy way about him, making you feel like you'd known him forever. "You know, I didn't want to come tonight. Socializing isn't exactly my strong suit," I confessed, feeling unusually open. "Tell me about it." "I only came because Jess promised Lily could tag along for a bit. Wanted her to meet some normal adults, whatever that means," Tom said, rolling his eyes. The conversation shifted to Lily, and I could see the light in Tom's eyes when he talked about her. "She's something else, my Lily. Smart, kind, a bit too cheeky for her own good," he said, a proud smile spreading across his face. I was intrigued. "She sounds wonderful. Raising a kid on your own, that's got to be tough," I remarked. Tom shrugged, his expression turning serious. "It's not easy, but Lily makes it all worth it. She's the best thing that ever happened to me." As the party wound down, I realized I didn't want this conversation to end. Tom felt like a breath of fresh air in my calculated routine life. "Hey, maybe we could grab a coffee sometime, talk more about market trends or whatever," I found myself saying, surprising even myself. Tom's smile was the answer I hoped for. "I'd like that. It's been a long time since I had a reason to look forward to something." Very soon I met Tom's daughter, and she was like a breath of fresh air. We quickly became friends, which made her father very happy. That's how a simple meeting turned into a real love affair. After Tom and I decided to tie the knot, it was clear we wanted something simple. No fancy dresses or grand churches, just us, my folks, and Lily, who was more excited than anyone. The day was plain but perfect, filled with genuine smiles and a few happy tears. Moving into Tom's house afterwards, I was buzzing with ideas to make the place feel more like ours, not just his. My new life meant working from home, which my boss was surprisingly cool about. It gave me the chance to really bond with Lily. I'd pick her up from school, and we'd chat about everything under the sun on our way to her ballet classes. She started calling me Mom, which warmed my heart every single time. Creating a cozy home for us became my new project, filling it with love and laughter. But as the months rolled by, things with Tom started shifting, so subtly at first. He'd make offhand comments about dinner being too bland or too salty. "Sarah, what's this supposed to be?" Tom would ask, poking at a casserole I'd spend hours on. "Supposed to be your dinner, but if you're going to act all Gordon Ramsay about it, maybe you should cook tomorrow," I'd retort, trying to keep the mood light. He didn't. Instead, the critiques piled up. My appearance became his next target. "Babe, when did you last hit the gym? You're looking different." Tom dropped casually one evening, his eyes skimming over me like I was a fixer-upper. "Guess I've been too busy being a stepmom and working from home. But thanks for the heads up," I snapped back, the sting of his words hitting harder than expected. Lily, bless her, was my silver lining. She and I grew closer, our bond unaffected by the growing tension between her dad and me. "Mom, can you help me with my homework?" Lily would ask, her bright eyes always looking up to me for guidance. "Of course, sweetie, let's tackle it together," I'd reply, grateful for her presence and the normalcy it brought. Yet despite my efforts to keep our home a haven, Tom's dissatisfaction seemed to seep into every corner. "You know, Sarah, maybe you should try one of those online cooking classes, spice things up a bit," Tom suggested one night, his tone laced with an undercurrent of displeasure. "Or maybe we could try eating out more, give your taste buds a break from my terrible cooking," I'd counter, half joking but deeply wounded. Life at home started feeling less like a family and more like walking on eggshells. Tom's attitude took a nosedive, and it wasn't just about small things anymore. He set these crazy rules, like expecting a brand new dish for dinner every single day. It was as if he thought I was some kind of gourmet chef instead of his partner. One evening, I was in the kitchen trying to whip up something new to keep him happy. I was juggling work emails on my phone, stirring a pot, and mentally planning my next day when Tom walked in, a scowl already forming on his face. "What's for dinner?" he asked, his tone sharp. "I'm trying something new, a recipe I found online. Thought we could use a little variety," I said, trying to sound upbeat. He just humphed, peering over my shoulder. "Doesn't look very appetizing, you know. When you decided to work from home, I thought you'd at least manage to keep the house in order and cook decent meals." His words stung. "Tom, you know I'm working too, right? It's not like I'm sitting around all day. Plus, I pick up Lily, help her with homework, visit my parents." He cut me off. Yeah, always the same excuse. You're at home, aren't you? Shouldn't be too hard to keep things tidy and cook properly." I bit my tongue, holding back the tears. It was becoming a nightly ritual, this dance of disappointment and criticism. One night, as we settled on the couch to watch TV, he started on about my appearance, pointing at the women on the screen. "Look at them, they're about your age, right? Why do they look so much younger and better?" I tried to keep my voice level. "Tom, those women have all day to focus on looking good. They likely have personal trainers, chefs, and who knows what cosmetic work done. but he wouldn't have it. Excuses, Sarah, it's all about priorities. You used to care about how you looked. I felt deflated, worn out. It wasn't just about the cooking or the cleaning anymore. It was a constant comparison. A reminder that I wasn't enough. During these times, Lily was my only solace. Now a teenager, she saw through her dad's behavior. "Mom, you don't deserve this. Why do you put up with it? You should just leave him," she'd say. Her words filled with worry and anger. But I couldn't bring myself to believe that the Tom I fell in love with was completely gone. "He's under a lot of stress, Lily. I believe he still loves us. He'll change," I'd respond, more to convince myself than her. It's been a roller coaster, to say the least. 15 years of ups and downs, but mostly, it feels like I've been riding a slow descent into a place I never thought I'd find myself. Now, at 55, with my stepdaughter Lily living her own life, though we talk every day, sharing secrets and stories like we used to, life threw me another curveball. Cancer. The word hit me like a freight train, but somehow I managed to keep my composure long enough to tell Tom. His reaction? Well, it was something. Not anger, not sadness, just disappointment. Not because of the diagnosis, but because I wouldn't be around to cook his meals or clean the house like I used to. "What am I supposed to do now? Look after myself?" he had said, his voice laced with irritation rather than concern. I was stunned, not sure how to respond to such blatant selfishness. It's not like I expected a dramatic outpouring of love and support, but a little empathy wouldn't have hurt. His lack of concern cut deeper than any diagnosis could, so I started treatment, spending more time in the hospital than at home. My parents, blessed their hearts, visited whenever they could, despite their own health issues. Lily, too, was a constant presence, her calls and visits a bright spot in those dreary hospital days. Tom. He never showed, not once. It hurt more than I wanted to admit. Even after everything, part of me hoped he'd come around, show that he cared even just a little. During one of Lily's visits, I couldn't hide my disappointment any longer. "I can't believe he hasn't shown up, not even once," I confided, trying to keep the bitterness out of my voice. Lily, ever the straight shooter, didn't mince her words. "Mom, you deserve so much better. I've been saying it for years. It's like he doesn't even see you. You're fighting this battle, and where is he? Nowhere. You need to think about what's best for you now." I knew she was right, but it's not easy to let go of 15 years, even if they weren't all good. Deep down, I still harbored that small flicker of hope that things could get better, that Tom would change. But lying in that hospital bed, facing my own mortality, I started to see things more clearly. Maybe it was time to start thinking about what I needed, not just what Tom wanted. The revelation came on a Tuesday, just another ordinary day until Lily walked into my hospital room with a look that spelled trouble. I could tell something was up the moment I saw her. Lily never was good at hiding her feelings. "Mom, we need to talk," she started, avoiding my gaze. That's when my stomach tied itself into knots. Lily calling me Mom was always a balm to my soul, but today it felt like the prelude to bad news. "What's wrong, Lily?" I asked, bracing myself. "It's about Dad," she hesitated, then took a deep breath. "He's seeing someone else, Mom, and it's serious. He introduced her to me last week." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Not that our marriage was perfect, but to hear he'd moved on so blatantly was a different kind of hurt. "How long?" was all I managed to muster, my voice barely above a whisper. "A while, I guess." "I'm so sorry, Mom," Lily's voice cracked, her usual toughness giving way to concern. I sat there trying to process the news. Betrayed, yes, but surprised, not entirely. Tom hadn't been a husband to me in a long time. Still, the confirmation of his infidelity stung. The shock of it hit me hard, though a part of me wasn't surprised. Tom's late nights, the sudden interest in looking younger, the new cologne. It all made sense now. Yet hearing it out loud from Lily felt like a betrayal of a whole different kind. Does he think this is okay? Introducing her to you like it's all normal. I couldn't keep the anger out of my voice. Lily shrugged. He's convinced himself you're already gone. Mom says it's time he moved on for his happiness. It's like he doesn't even care about how this would hurt you, I laughed, a harsh sound that surprised even me. His happiness, huh? What about all those years I spent trying to make him happy? What a joke. And that's when it hit me. Tom had never really seen me. Not the real me. He saw a caretaker, a cook, a cleaner, but never his wife. And here I was battling cancer while he played house with someone else. For the first time in a long time, I felt a spark of something fierce within me. Anger, yes, but also determination. I've been living for him, worrying about his meals, his house, his happiness. It was time to start living for myself, I declared. Lily wiped away a tear, looking determined all of a sudden. What are you going to do? You can't let him just get away with this, she urged. A cold resolve settled over me. Tell him I agree to the divorce, I said firmly, surprising even myself with the decisiveness in my voice. It's clear he's moved on, and so should I. Lily's eyes widened. Really? Just like that? Yes, just like that. He thinks he can replace me so easily. Let him try. But he'll regret this, Lily. Not today, maybe not tomorrow, but one day he'll see what he's thrown away. Lily stood up, her stance shifting from worry to warrior-like. I'll tell him. And Mom, we'll get through this. Screw him and his midlife crisis fantasy. You're worth 1,000,000 of her. Her fiery spirit in that moment gave me strength. I was about to embark on a tough journey, battling both cancer and a crumbling marriage, but I wasn't alone. I had Lily, and together we were formidable. Thanks, Lily, we've got this, I said, a small smile breaking through the gloom. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one where I would reclaim my life and my dignity with my loyal stepdaughter by my side. 2 days had felt like an eternity, each moment dragging on as I lay in that hospital bed, my body fighting a battle I hadn't signed up for then. Tom walked in, his presence as cold as the chill running down my spine. The smirk on his face was something out of a nightmare, but this was my reality. He looked me over, his eyes devoid of any warmth. Look at you, all sick and pitiful. Can't say I'm surprised. You've let yourself go, haven't you? Found myself someone much better. Younger, prettier, healthier. He gloated, his words dripping with disdain. His words cut deeper than any knife could. But I was done showing him my pain. He threw the divorce papers on my bed, a challenge in his eyes. I took a deep breath, steadying my resolve. I picked up the pen and signed, each stroke a silent vow to myself that this was the beginning of my liberation, not my defeat. You're just as weak-willed as ever, pathetic, he sneered, a twisted satisfaction in his gaze. I met his stare, my voice steady. If that's what helps you sleep at night, Tom. The confusion flickered across his face, replaced quickly by his usual arrogance. He strutted out, leaving a trail of bitterness in his wake. As soon as the door clicked shut, I reached for my phone with a determination that surprised even me. I called Lily. It's done, but I need you to do something for me, I said, pausing to make sure I had her full attention. Tell your dad about the $3 million I plan to leave you, it's important he knows. There was a brief silence on the other end, and I could almost see the gears turning in her head. Mom, are you sure? He's going to flip out, she said. A small smile tugged at my lips. That's the point, darling. True to form, Tom's reaction was immediate and as predictable as ever. My phone became an incessant vibrating companion, lighting up with his attempts to reach me. With each missed call, I felt an inch taller, a bit stronger. I watched the number climb, 50, 60, 70 missed calls, and with it, my resolve solidified. I couldn't help but laugh, a sound that felt foreign yet fitting for the moment. Here I was, supposedly at my weakest, yet I'd never felt more empowered. I had taken the first real step towards freeing myself from the chains of Tom's manipulation and cruelty. The sun was just peeking through the blinds when Tom burst into my hospital room the next morning, desperation edged in every line of his face. "Sarah, I've been a fool. I see that now. I love you and I'm ready to leave her and start over with you. We can remarry, start fresh," he pleaded, his hands outstretched as if he could physically pull me back into the life we once shared. I couldn't help but laugh, a deep genuine sound that seemed to startle him. "Tom, you've shown me exactly who you are after years of neglect, cruelty, and now this betrayal. And you think what? A few sweet words and it's all forgiven." He blanched, taken aback by my reaction. "Sarah, please, I mean it. I realized I made a mistake," he said. I shook my head, still incredulous. "A mistake, Tom? You deliberately chose to step out on our marriage, humiliated me while I was at my lowest. No. It's too late for regrets." His desperation turned to anger, his face reddening. "You'll regret this, I'll make sure of it. I'll sue you for every penny of that hidden money of yours," he threatened. The threat was laughable. "Go ahead and try, Tom. That money, it's in my father's name. He made those investments, all legally binding and documented. You won't get a dime." The realization of his powerlessness hit him hard. His anger dissipated into sobs of frustration, a pitiful sight that had the guards rushing in as they escorted him out. I moved to the window, watching him. There he was, the man I'd spent so many years with, looking so defeated and alone. Yet I felt no pity. He was reaping what he'd sown, and in that moment, I knew I was finally free. "Justice prevails," I whispered to myself, a smile touching my lips. In that hospital room, I made a promise to myself. No longer would I be defined by the failings of my marriage or the cruelty of a man who couldn't appreciate the love and loyalty I'd offered. It was time to rebuild, to focus on my health, my happiness, and the future I deserved. The battle with cancer was like riding the world's most terrifying roller coaster, one where you can't see the track ahead. Months of treatment stretched out, with good days, where hope flickered bright, and bad days, where it dimmed to nearly nothing. Remission would come, lifting me up, only for exacerbation to drag me back down into the fight. But I kept fighting every single day, with every bit of strength I had, both for me and for Lily. Finally the doctors gave me the news I'd been dreaming of. I was healthy, the cancer was gone. Walking out of that hospital felt surreal, like stepping into a new life waiting to be written. The first start wasn't just symbolic, it was real, tangible, and it was mine for the taking. Recovery wasn't just about the physical, it was mental, emotional, a total overhaul of life as I knew it. The day I was discharged from the hospital marked not just the end of my treatment, but the beginning of something new, something mine. Lily picked me up, her car loaded with my few belongings, ready to start fresh. "Mom?" she asked, her smile bright and encouraging. I couldn't help but return her smile. "More than ready, kiddo." We drove to my new place, a modest house I'd bought with the money I'd wisely invested over the years. It wasn't just a house though. It was a promise of new beginnings, of freedom. As we unpacked, Lily chatted about decorating ideas, about painting the walls and planting a garden. "This is going to be a place of happiness, Mom. You'll see. We'll make it our sanctuary." Her enthusiasm was infectious. For the first time in years, I felt light, like a weight had been lifted. I'd like that, Lily. A sanctuary sounds perfect. We took a break, sitting amidst boxes with takeout containers between us. You know, I've been thinking, I started, about what comes next. I want to use this chance not just to heal, but to rediscover who I am, who I want to be. Lily nodded, taking my hand. I've got your back, Mom, always, and hey, you're already doing it. Look at how far you've come. She was right. The journey from being trapped in a loveless marriage to standing on my own 2 feet hadn't been easy. But here I was, ready to face the world on my terms. I'm thinking of starting a blog, I mused, sharing my story, maybe help others who've been in similar situations. That's an amazing idea. Lily's eyes sparkled with pride. You've got so much wisdom to share, plus you're pretty badass, you know. I laughed. The sound bright and genuine. Thanks, Lily. I guess I am, aren't I? Said and done, I started my own personal blog, in which I shared the details of my struggle with cancer. People in the comments supported me, shared their own experiences. It was touching and reassuring. During one of our quiet evenings, Lily shared her own monumental decision. Mom, I've cut ties with Dad, she said, her voice steady but I could see the turmoil in her eyes. After everything, I see you as my real mom. He chose his path, and I've chosen mine with you. Hearing her call me Mom in that context, knowing the weight it carried, filled me with an indescribable mix of pride and sorrow. Sorrow for the broken bridges in her life, but pride in her strength and in the bond we shared. Lily, there's something I've been meaning to tell you, I started, taking her hands in mine. When the time comes, I'll be leaving everything to you. The house, the $3 million, all of it. You're my family, my future. Lily looked at me, tears burning in her eyes, but a smile breaking through. I don't need any of that, Mom. Just having you is enough. But thank you for everything. In that moment, any lingering shadows of the past faded away. We were family, bound not by blood, but by choice, by love. And as we looked ahead, the future wasn't just a blank page, it was a canvas waiting for us to fill it with color, with life.
The divorce papers sat on the kitchen counter like a loaded gun. Next to them, Caleb's handwriting mocked me from a pale yellow post-it note, I need solitude to find myself. Don't try to contact me. I'm sorry. 15 years of marriage reduced to 23 words. I picked up the note, crumpled it, then smoothed it out again. The words hadn't changed. My hands trembled as I reached for my phone, muscle memory taking over as I dialed his number. The number you have reached is no longer in service. Of course. He'd thought of everything. I grabbed the bottle of Cabernet we'd been saving for our anniversary next month, uncorked it, and poured myself a generous glass. The rich liquid caught the afternoon light streaming through my kitchen window. Our wedding photo still hung on the wall, his academic regalia making him look distinguished, important. Professor Caleb Thompson, beloved educator, devoted husband. What a crock of shit. My phone buzzed. Natalie's name flashed on the screen. You're late for drinks, she said. Everything okay? He left. The words felt foreign in my mouth. Caleb left. What? I'm coming over. No, I'll come to you. I need to get out of this house. 20 minutes later, I walked into O'Malley's. Natalie waved from our usual corner booth, her face etched with concern. I dropped into the seat across from her, sliding the divorce papers onto the sticky table. Jesus Christ, she whispered, flipping through the pages. No warning. Nothing. Just a post-it note. Like I'm a reminder on his fucking calendar. The waitress appeared. Your usual, Vera. Double tonight, Rosa. Actually, make it 2 doubles. Rosa's eyes darted between me and the papers on the table. Coming right up, honey. Natalie reached across and squeezed my hand. What are you going to do? Sign them, I guess. What choice do I have? I pulled my hand away, needing the distance. 15 years, Nat. 15 years and he couldn't even say goodbye to my face. There has to be more to this. People don't just. Apparently, they do. I caught Rosa's eye and mouthed, "Thank you," as she set down our drinks. You know what the worst part is? I keep thinking about last week, when he insisted on making dinner. He seemed so normal. Happy, even. Was he planning this the whole time? Just going through the motions? Maybe he's having some kind of breakdown. Remember when Jeff's brother suddenly joined that commune in Oregon? This is different. I took a long sip of whiskey, letting it burn. Caleb's too calculated for that. Too controlled. This isn't impulsive, he planned this. My phone buzzed again. Unknown number. Hello? Is this Vera Thompson? A young woman's voice, hesitant but determined. Yes, who's this? My name is Jasmine. I used to be one of your husband's students. We need to talk. It's important. Something in her tone made my stomach clench. About what? Not over the phone. Could we meet somewhere? Tomorrow maybe. I looked at Natalie, who was watching me with raised eyebrows. Tomorrow at noon. There's a coffee shop called Bean there on 5th Street. I know it. Thank you, Mrs. Thompson. And I'm sorry. The line went dead. Who was that? Natalie asked. One of Caleb's former students. I drained my glass. She says we need to talk. About what? I don't know. I stared at the divorce papers, at his precise signature at the bottom. But I have a feeling I'm about to find out why my husband really left. Rosa appeared with fresh drinks, her dark eyes full of sympathy. On the house, honey. You look like you need it. I didn't argue. Tomorrow would bring answers, but tonight? Tonight I would let myself fall apart, surrounded by the only 2 people who hadn't abandoned me yet. The hangover hit me like a sledgehammer as I walked into the dental clinic. Rosa's eyes followed me from behind the reception desk, her usual morning snark replaced by something softer. Pity. God, I hated pity. Dr. Matthews wants to see you in his office, she said quietly. Before your first patient. Perfect. Just what I needed before meeting Jasmine at noon, a lecture from my boss about keeping my personal life from affecting my work. As if I had any control over that now. I found him reviewing charts, his reading glasses perched on the edge of his nose. Vera, close the door, please. If this is about yesterday. Caleb called. He removed his glasses, polishing them with his tie. He's requested a leave of absence from the university. Indefinite. He mentioned your situation. My stomach lurched. Of course he'd called my boss before me. Damage control. Always the professor, always 3 steps ahead. I appreciate your concern, Dr. Matthews, but take the week off. Paid leave. Sort things out. I'd rather work. He sighed, that paternal look I'd always hated creeping across his face. The university board is meeting today. There are rumors, Vera. About Caleb. About certain improprieties. The room tilted slightly. What kind of improprieties? Nothing concrete. But given your position here, and our connection to the university's dental program. He spread his hands. Take the week. Please. I walked out in a daze, barely registering Rosa's concerned look as I gathered my things. My phone buzzed. Natalie. You okay? She asked. After last night. Matthews just put me on leave. Apparently, there are rumors about Caleb at the university. A pause. What kind of rumors? I don't know. But I'm meeting his former student in 2 hours. Want to bet they're connected? Want backup? No. I need to do this alone. Being there was quiet when I arrived, just a few students hunched over laptops. I ordered coffee and claimed a corner table, watching the door. At exactly noon, she walked in. Jasmine was younger than I'd expected. Pretty, in that fresh-faced way that made me feel ancient. She clutched her bag like a shield as she approached. Mrs. Thompson. Her voice trembled slightly. Thank you for meeting me. It's just Vera now. Sit. She perched on the edge of her chair, fingers twisting the strap of her bag. I don't know where to start. How about with why my husband left? He found out we were going to come forward. All of us. Ice spread through my chest. All of who? The girls. The ones he. She swallowed hard. It started my sophomore year. He was my advisor. He said I had potential, that he could help my career. Then came the private meetings, the late-night emails, the suggestions that certain arrangements could help my grades. The coffee turned to acid in my stomach. How many? 7 that I know of. Maybe more. She reached into her bag, pulled out a manila envelope. We have proof. Emails, texts, photos. We were going to take it to the board today, but he must have found out somehow. My hands shook as I opened the envelope. Screenshots of messages, each more damning than the last. Photos of Caleb with different young women, his hand always somewhere it shouldn't be. Dates spanning years. Years we were married. Why are you showing me this? Because you deserve to know the truth. And because we need your help. She leaned forward, voice dropping. He's not just hiding, Mrs. Thompson. He's starting over. Building something new. Something dangerous. What do you mean? He's gathering followers. Vulnerable students, mostly. Calling it a spiritual retreat or something. But it's just another way to control people. She pulled out her phone, showed me a website. See? He's already got dozens of people believing his enlightenment bullshit. I stared at the screen, at Caleb's serene smile below the header, Finding Truth Through Solitude, a Journey of Self-Discovery. Son of a bitch, I whispered. We can stop him. But we need someone he won't expect. Someone who knows him better than anyone. Her eyes met mine. Will you help us? I thought about the post-it note, about 15 years of lies. About 7 young women whose lives he'd tried to destroy. Yes, I said. I'll help you destroy him. The other women gathered in Natalie's living room, their faces a gallery of shared trauma. 6 besides Jasmine, just like she'd said. Young, bright, broken. Each clutching their own manila envelope of evidence against my husband. He always chose the quiet ones, Sarah, a grad student, explained. The ones who needed recommendations, who couldn't afford to lose their scholarships. I paced behind Natalie's couch, the weight of their stories pressing against my chest. And none of you went to the administration. 2 did, Jasmine said. Remember Angela Martinez? The name hit like a slap. The student who had a mental breakdown last year. She tried to report him. Next thing we knew, she was accused of plagiarism. Lost her scholarship, her graduate position, everything. My hands shook as I poured more wine. And the other one? Me, a redhead, Rachel whispered. He had photos. Said he'd release them if I didn't withdraw my complaint. The doorbell rang. Natalie answered it, returning with Eli. His police uniform was wrinkled, his face tight with concern. Our eyes met across the room, and something in his expression made my stomach drop. We need to talk, he said quietly. Alone. In Natalie's kitchen, he pulled out his phone. Remember that wellness check you asked me to run on Caleb's retreat location? What about it? It's not just a retreat. He showed me a police report. 3 women have gone missing in that area in the past month. All former students. Jesus Christ. The room spun slightly. You think he's? I think he's escalating. The university board meeting spooked him. He's gathering followers, yes, but he's also targeting specific women. Women who could expose him. A text buzzed on my phone. Unknown number. I know what you're planning, Vera. Stop now, or Angela won't be the only cautionary tale. I showed Eli the message. His jaw tightened. He's watching us, I said. Let him. Eli's voice was steel. We can use that. Back in the living room, the women fell silent, watching us. Their fear was palpable, a living thing that filled the room. Change of plans, I announced. We're not just exposing him. We're taking him down. Tonight. Jasmine stood. What do you mean? He's threatening you all through me. But he's made a mistake. I held up my phone. He's given us proof of witness intimidation. And with 7 testimonies, plus evidence. 8, a quiet voice said from the doorway. We turned. Rosa stood there, clutching her own manila envelope. Rosa? My voice cracked. You? 15 years ago. When he was just starting at the university. She stepped forward, shoulders straight. I was his teaching assistant. He destroyed my career before it began. Made sure I'd never teach. The pieces clicked. Rosa's bitterness, her protectiveness of young female patients, her sharp edges. That's why you've always watched out for the interns, I whispered. She nodded, tears in her eyes. I couldn't stop him then. But I can help stop him now. My phone buzzed again. Another text. Last warning, Vera. Walk away, or watch them all burn. I looked around the room, at these women who'd carried their pain in silence for so long. At Rosa, who'd been protecting others while hiding her own scars. At Eli, whose face promised justice. He wants us afraid, I said. Isolated. But together. Together we're stronger than his threats. What's the plan? Sarah asked. I smiled, a cold thing that felt foreign on my face. We give him exactly what he wants, me, alone, coming to beg forgiveness. Except I won't be alone. And there won't be any forgiveness. Eli touched my arm. Vera. No. He thinks he knows me, the quiet, supportive wife. The one who'll keep his secrets. I met each woman's eyes in turn. Let's show him how wrong he is. My phone buzzed one final time. I didn't need to look to know it was him, trying to maintain control. But control, like everything else, was about to slip through his fingers. Ladies, I said, let's go destroy my husband. Eli spread the surveillance photos across his kitchen table while Lucas napped in the next room. The retreat compound sprawled across 20 acres of woodland, a collection of cabins surrounding a main lodge. In every image, young women moved between buildings like sleepwalkers, their faces vacant. They're not prisoners, Eli said, at least not technically. They're there voluntarily. Brainwashed, I corrected, studying a photo of Caleb leading what appeared to be a meditation session. How many? 23 residents. All women, all under 30. He hesitated. And Angela Martinez is there. My head snapped up. The student who tried to report him. She's alive. Barely functioning, according to our informant. He's got them all on some strict regimen, meditation, fasting, isolation periods. Classic cult tactics. A soft cry came from Lucas's room. Eli moved to get up, but I touched his arm. I'll go. In the dim nursery, Lucas reached for me from his crib, tear-streaked face breaking my heart. I lifted him, breathing in his baby-sweet scent, remembering how Caleb had reacted when I'd suggested having children. Too much responsibility, he'd said. We need to focus on my career. Now I understood why. My phone vibrated, a text from Greg, Caleb's former mentor, need to talk. Urgent. Meet me at the university library. Eli, I called softly. Can you watch Lucas? Something's come up. Greg waited in the rare books section, looking older than I remembered. His hands trembled as he pulled out a leather-bound journal. I found this in my office, he said. It's from 1997, when Caleb was my graduate assistant. I opened it. Pages of neat handwriting detailed research subjects, female students, their vulnerabilities, their pressure points. Rosa's name appeared early on. He was perfecting his technique, I whispered. Even then. I should have seen it. Greg's voice cracked. But he was brilliant, charismatic. I thought. He stopped abruptly, eyes fixing on something behind me. I turned. A campus security guard stood there, radio in hand. Professor Thompson, he said. You're in violation of the restraining order. What restraining order? The one your husband filed this morning. You need to come with me. Greg stepped forward. There must be some mistake. It's okay, I said, clutching the journal. Call Eli. Tell him what happened. At the campus police station, Officer Chen slid a document across her desk. The restraining order cited erratic behavior and threatening communications. Attached were screenshots of texts I'd never sent. Emails I'd never written. He fabricated these, I said. Maybe so, Chen replied, but until a judge says otherwise, you can't come within 500 feet of him or the retreat property. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. Checkmate, darling. Did you really think I wouldn't be prepared? See. Another buzz. A photo appeared, Lucas's empty crib, taken minutes ago. My blood froze. I need to make a call. In the hallway, I dialed Eli with shaking fingers. No answer. Then Natalie. Nothing. A final text from Caleb, you have a choice, Vera. Drop everything, the accusations, the evidence, all of it, or you'll never see our godson again. You have 1 hour. I stared at the words until they blurred. Caleb had always been 3 steps ahead, always calculating. But he'd made one crucial mistake. Lucas wasn't just my godson. He was my reason for ensuring Caleb could never hurt anyone again. I dialed Rosa's number. It's happening, I said when she answered. Plan B. Call the others. And Rosa. Make sure Sarah brings those files from the university's security system. What about Lucas? I thought of those vacant-faced women in the surveillance photos. Of Angela Martinez, trapped in Caleb's web. Of Rosa, carrying her scars for 15 years. He thinks he's taking everything from me, I said. Let's show him what it really means to lose everything. I hung up and walked back to Officer Chen's desk, forcing my voice to stay steady. I'd like to report a kidnapping. The game wasn't over. It was just beginning. The retreat's main lodge loomed before me, all rustic wood and false serenity. Two of Caleb's followers, seekers, he called them, flanked me as I climbed the steps. Their grip on my arms was gentle but firm, a perfect metaphor for his whole operation. "Sister Vera," one murmured, "he's waiting in the meditation room." Of course he was. Everything choreographed, just like always. Through the windows, I caught glimpses of women in white linen, moving like ghosts between buildings. Angela Martinez sat cross-legged in the garden, staring at nothing. My hand tightened around Greg's journal in my pocket. The meditation room door opened. Caleb stood there, backlit like some cut-rate messiah. "Darling," he said, spreading his arms. "Welcome home. Where's Lucas?" "Safe. With Natalie." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "She's quite receptive to our teachings, actually. Amazing what a few carefully chosen words can accomplish." The implications hit like a punch. Natalie wasn't answering calls because she was here, under his influence. Just like Angela. Just like all of them. "Your choice," he prompted. "I want to see Lucas first. After you surrender the evidence. All of it." A commotion outside drew his attention. Through the window, I saw Greg stumbling up the path, looking desperate. Right on schedule. What's he doing here? Caleb's mask slipped slightly. Probably looking for his journal. I pulled it from my pocket. Interesting reading. Very methodical. His eyes narrowed. "Give it to me. Everything you've built here, it's just a larger version of what you did to Rosa, isn't it? Find the vulnerable ones, isolate them, make them dependent. I'm helping them find purpose. Like you helped Angela find purpose." Something dark flashed across his face. She was unstable. They all were, until I showed them the path. The path to what? Being your personal cult. Watch your tone. His voice dropped dangerously. "Remember who has the power here." A woman's scream pierced the air. We both turned. In the garden, Rosa stood over Angela's crumpled form. "Help!" Rosa shouted. "She's not breathing." Caleb moved toward the door. I blocked his path. "Your choice," I echoed his words. "Let me see Lucas, or I start making phone calls. The police are already watching this place. One word from me. You're bluffing. Try me." More commotion outside. Greg had reached the garden, was kneeling beside Angela. Other women gathered, their program's serenity cracking. "Tick-tock," I said. Caleb's jaw clenched. "Follow me." He led me to a cabin at the compound's edge. Inside, Natalie sat with Lucas, her eyes glazed but clearing slightly at my entrance. "Vera?" She blinked rapidly. "What's happening?" "It's okay," I said, not taking my eyes off Caleb. "Everything's going to be okay." Lucas reached for me. I took him, breathing in his familiar scent. "Now the evidence," Caleb demanded. I smiled. "Check your phone." He pulled it out, face darkening as messages flooded in. Every woman he'd ever manipulated, every piece of evidence we'd gathered, being sent to the university board, the police, the media. All time-stamped for automatic release unless I entered a code every hour. "You can't." "I already did." I backed toward the door with Lucas. "Angela's fine, by the way. Just a little acting from Rosa." "But the police response time to a medical emergency?" "About 3 minutes." Sirens wailed in the distance. "You're just like them," he snarled. "Weak, needing guidance." "No, Caleb. I'm exactly what you made me, someone who learned to play the long game." His followers were emerging from their trances now, watching through windows as police cars appeared on the horizon. "Natalie," I called softly. "Time to go home." She stood shakily, moving toward us as Caleb's carefully constructed world began to crumble around him. "This isn't over," he warned. "You're right." I shifted Lucas to my hip. "It's just beginning." The first police car crested the hill as we walked away, leaving Caleb to face the storm he'd created, one calculated manipulation at a time. The interrogation room's fluorescent lights made everything look sickly, unreal. Detective Martinez, no relation to Angela, placed a stack of photos in front of me. "Crime scene images from the retreat. 3 bodies," he said flatly. "Found buried behind the meditation cabin. All former students." My stomach lurched. That's impossible. We were watching him for 6 weeks. These deaths date back 2 years. He slid forward another photo, Caleb being led away in handcuffs, that serene smile still on his face. "Your husband's looking at multiple homicide charges. And you? You're looking at obstruction of justice." I was trying to help those women. By running a vigilante operation. By interfering with an ongoing investigation. He leaned forward. "We've been building this case for months. Your little revenge scheme nearly destroyed years of work." The door opened. Eli stepped in, still in uniform. His face was carved from stone. "They're processing Natalie now," he said quietly. "The drugs in her system. She's not doing well." I closed my eyes. "Lucas? Safe. With my sister." He wouldn't look at me. "The department's reviewing my involvement. I'll probably lose my badge." "Eli, I never meant." "Save it." His voice cracked slightly. "You used me. Used my position to get information. Put our son at risk. He was never in danger." "No." He finally met my gaze. "You brought a 3-year-old into a compound where women were being murdered. Where your best friend was being drugged. All for what? To prove you weren't as blind as everyone thought. To show Caleb you could play his game." The truth hit like a physical blow. I had become exactly what I was fighting against, someone so focused on control, on winning, that I'd lost sight of the casualties. Detective Martinez cleared his throat. "Dr. Matthews called. The dental clinic's board is meeting tomorrow about your license." Of course. My whole life, unraveling thread by thread. "I want to see him," I said. "Your husband." "Not happening. Please. I need to understand." "Understand what?" Eli's voice was ice. "How he manipulated people. Destroyed lives. Look in a mirror, Vera. You're more like him than you think." He walked out, leaving me with the photos of 3 women I'd never known existed. 3 women I might have saved if I'd gone to the police instead of playing detective. My phone buzzed, they hadn't confiscated it yet. A text from Rosa, "Angela's talking. Really talking. Says there are more bodies." Another buzz. An email from the university board, announcing a formal investigation into Greg's involvement. His career, destroyed because I'd dragged him into this. The final message was from an unknown number. A video link. With trembling fingers, I opened it. Caleb's face filled the screen, recorded before his arrest. "Hello, darling. If you're watching this, everything has gone according to plan. You always were predictable, so desperate to prove yourself, to show everyone you weren't just the quiet, supportive wife. Did you enjoy playing detective? Making your little charts and gathering your evidence?" His smile widened. "Thank you for finding those bodies for me. I was getting worried they'd never be discovered. And now? Now everyone sees you exactly as I always did, reckless, obsessed, dangerous. Just like me. The video ended. Detective Martinez watched me with a mixture of pity and disgust. "We'll need your formal statement," he said. "About everything." I stared at the photos of the dead women, at my distorted reflection in the interrogation room window. Caleb was right. I'd become exactly what he wanted, a mirror of his own obsession, his own capacity for destruction. "I'll tell you everything," I whispered. "About the bodies, the manipulation, all of it. But first, I need you to understand something." "What's that?" "There's one more secret. One he thinks only he knows." I met the detective's eyes. "And it's going to destroy him completely. Because Caleb had taught me well, too well. He'd shown me that the best revenge isn't quick or clean. It's patient. Methodical. And most importantly, it's devastating. Just like the truth I'd been saving for exactly this moment." The prison visiting room smelled of industrial cleaner and despair. Caleb sat across from me, orange jumpsuit stark against his pale skin, that familiar serene smile still in place. "Come to gloat, darling." I placed Greg's journal on the table between us. "No. I came to return this." His eyes flickered to the leather-bound book. "Ah. My early work. Quite amateur, looking back. 3 Bodies wasn't amateur. 4, actually." His smile widened slightly. "But you knew that already, didn't you?" I slid a photograph across the table. A younger Caleb, standing beside a woman with my face, my build, my coloring. "My sister," I said quietly. "The one who disappeared 15 years ago. The reason I applied to work at your university's dental clinic." The smile faltered, just for a moment. "You never wondered why I looked so familiar?" My voice remained steady. "Why I worked so hard to get your attention? To become exactly the kind of quiet, supportive wife you wanted?" "Vera. Sarah was her name. But you knew her as Patient Zero in your journal. Your first experiment in control." His hands, always so steady, began to tremble slightly. "You can't prove anything." "Actually, I can. Sarah kept records too. Hidden where you'd never think to look, in her dental records. X-rays with dates, photos of injuries, detailed notes about her accidents. All safely stored in the university clinic's archive. That's why you became a dental hygienist. 15 years of waiting. Watching. Learning how you operate." I leaned forward. "Did you really think I was just another victim, Caleb? That I didn't plan every step, including my own revenge-obsessed spiral?" Detective Martinez entered quietly, standing by the door. "The FBI's reopening 20 cold cases," I continued. "All women who matched Sarah's description, all connected to universities where you taught. And guess what they found in that journal? DNA. Hair samples. Trophies." Caleb's facade cracked. "You're lying. You taught me well, how to manipulate, how to play the long game. The difference is, I had a better reason." I stood. "The detective has some questions about Sarah. And the others. They'll never believe you," he snarled. "You're unstable, obsessed." "No, I'm patient. Like you said in your video message, predictable. You just predicted the wrong pattern." His composure shattered completely. He lunged across the table, hands reaching for my throat. Guards rushed in, restraining him as he screamed accusations, threats, confessions. I watched him break, 15 years of careful planning culminating in this moment. Detective Martinez touched my arm. "We got it all on camera," he said softly. "The confession, the assault. It's over." In the hallway, Eli waited with Lucas. His face was softer now, understanding replacing judgment. You could have told me, he said. I needed your genuine reactions. Everyone's genuine reactions. It was the only way to make him believe he was winning. Lucas reached for me. I took him, holding him close. The department cleared you, Eli continued. And me. They're calling it an unofficial undercover operation. And Natalie? Home from the hospital. Rosa's with her. He hesitated. She understands why you couldn't warn her. They all do. I thought of Sarah, of all the women who'd never gotten justice. Of the careful path I'd walked between revenge and redemption. What happens now? Eli asked. Through the window, I could see Caleb being led away, his shoulders hunched, his power finally broken. In his journal, he'd written that true control comes from making others see themselves through your eyes. He was right about that. He just never realized he wasn't the only one watching. Now. I kissed Lucas's forehead. Now we go home. And we live. Behind us, Caleb's screams echoed down the corridor, but they held no power anymore. Just the impotent rage of a man who'd finally discovered what it meant to be truly, completely controlled. Sarah would have appreciated the irony. The letter arrived on Sarah's birthday. Prison stationery, Caleb's precise handwriting. I carried it unopened to the cemetery, where fresh flowers marked my sister's finally discovered grave. Natalie found me there, sitting cross-legged on the grass. She looked better, clearer, stronger. The retreat's fog had lifted from her eyes. Rosa said you might be here. She settled beside me. That his? I nodded, turning the envelope over in my hands. You don't have to read it. I know. But I did. One last move in our long game. The paper crackled as I unfolded it. Vera. You were right about one thing, I did recognize you. Not at first, but gradually. Something in the way you watched me, calculated every move. Sarah had that same intensity. I wondered when you'd make your move. 15 years of waiting, watching. I should have recognized the patience of a predator rather than prey. You asked me once why I chose you. The truth is, you chose me. You crafted yourself into my perfect match, knowing I couldn't resist. In doing so, you became exactly what you claimed to hate, a manipulator, a destroyer of lives. We're the same now, you and I. Remember that when you're lying awake at night, telling yourself you did it all for justice. See? Natalie touched my hand. You okay? I let the letter fall onto Sarah's grave, watching the wind catch it. He still thinks this was about revenge. Wasn't it? No. I stood, brushing grass from my jeans. It was about stopping him. Sarah was just the beginning, I had to make sure she was the end, too. My phone buzzed. A text from Eli, Angela's group therapy session went well. She asked about you. Another buzz, Rosa. Jasmine aced her dental boards. We're celebrating at O'Malley's. Coming. They're healing, Natalie said softly. All of them. Because of you. Because of themselves. I looked at Sarah's headstone, at the dates that finally told her complete story. I just helped them find their way back. And what about you? Are you healing? The wind picked up, scattering the letter's pieces like confetti. Somewhere across town, Lucas was probably helping Eli make dinner, standing on his little stool to reach the counter. Later, we'd read stories and talk about his day at preschool, normal moments that felt miraculous after everything. I thought catching him would feel like winning, I said. Like some grand victory. But it just feels quiet. Yeah. I touched Sarah's headstone. The kind of quiet that comes after a storm. Speaking of quiet. Natalie hesitated. Greg called. They're releasing his memoir next month. The whole story, how Caleb manipulated him, how he unknowingly enabled everything. Good. People need to understand how it happens. How someone like Caleb finds the cracks in your life and widens them until you fall through. We walked back to our cars, leaving Sarah's grave and Caleb's scattered words behind. The setting sun painted everything in soft gold, making the world look newer than it was. You never told me, Natalie said as we reached the parking lot. That last secret you mentioned to Detective Martinez, the one that would destroy Caleb completely. What was it? I smiled, thinking of Caleb's face in that prison visiting room, of the moment he realized the truth. There was no secret. I just needed him to think there was, to keep him off balance until he confessed. I unlocked my car. His biggest fear was always that someone else held power over him. So I gave him that fear, let it eat away at him until he cracked. Just like he did to others. Just like that. Natalie hugged me goodbye, and I drove home to my family, to the life I'd built while planning Caleb's destruction. He was right about one thing, I had become like him in some ways. I'd learned to manipulate, to calculate, to wait. But he'd missed the crucial difference, I'd done it all so I could stop being like him. So I could finally lay down the weapon of revenge and pick up something lighter, something that felt more like peace. Even if that peace still echoed, sometimes, with the sound of storms.